Hey guys, I'm here to get into Dancer in the Dark. This is a film that came out in the year 2000 and is directed by Lars von Trier. This is a big one because this came out as just one of the most original explorations of deep depression I've ever seen. Which is, turns out there really was deep depression going on the set. So there was a lot of madness going on here, particularly between Lars von Trier and Bjork. A lot of power bouncing with it, as far as like him having desire to sexually assault while she, is just Bjork and passionately moving her performance along for the sake of the art, hating this man all along the way through. And then it's almost like in a very raw sense, this comes right out. And this does bring a lot of topics I certainly am about to. I think I mustered up the. I guess Dallas Faces, which is one of my all-time favorite directors, Roman Polanski. Like, I mean, he really is a great director, but man, it's like when I hear about what a horrible person he is and how much I relate to the substance behind what he sees. If something does kind of hurt him, if something it does defeat idealism in your heart a little bit. But all the same, it's like fascinating because it feels like here's a man who ultimately turned to Satan for too long. Whenever a moment of light comes to him, and so this sort of happens to Lars von Trier as well, and this kind of happens to a question of if I'm watching this and I'm so fascinated by it means I'm just fascinated by dark subject matter. It doesn't make me as bad as they are. I think sometimes it could be almost a lot to kind of face, like just be honest about your coldness, because depths like this are what kind of come. Like literally, you become whenever you have a dominating force, you literally use your place of position of power to do evil and harm upon a women particularly, man, a woman. That's horrible. My biggest phobia ever lies in a lot of that right there, just messing with a woman's mind in any sort of way. It's like, that's why I have that I love women so much that I stay away sort of perspective. And this film is a wonderful representation of why, because this really does star the best women of all time, Bjork and Catherine Deneuve. I think they're both some of the most incredible women, and most perfect expressions of feminist energy from for their both perspective arts, music and for the acting. I mean, that really does make this a really unique and original film. And it's made by, again, and Catherine Deneuve also. I know she also associated heavily with Roman Polanski before he was allowed to be known as a bad person. I mean, because it's like he was just a tragedy. He's like one of those fascinating, I think, directors in the end, because he literally is just not a good man, but he did get all this position of power and he did do good, like, a lot of good with that. And then ultimately, okay, but he's a scumbag. Like, it's almost like, I think that's the definition of cold. It's like, just because you can do this beautiful thing doesn't mean that you are a great human necessarily. A lot of this, but a lot of this is fascinating to look at because, again, societal perspective certainly make it clear there's hell as much as there's heaven. So I think to see people who actually are in hell and they and they brought it upon others, hell upon others, is just really fascinating to see what happens in this dynamic. It literally is like a glimpse of heaven and hell sort of balancing each other. And it's an unknowable force. And you don't know where this comes from, but this just lies in people. But it's just the most original. So it makes this a very unique expression of depression. It's about the most original film I've ever seen. Because it's like directing. It's like whenever I'm like, working with women of any sort, it's like it's always good. Literally, it never has been one slightly bit of a pressure about it. So I think that I'm just really looking at this, and I'm kind of at mystique of just how a man can let it get this evil with his perspective on women. Just because he's doing something he loves, and maybe it's cold-hearted to him. So, like, I don't know, like, it's almost like he can't take the cold-heartedness in her whenever he's in power. It's like when you're in power, it's like you just kind of want it to feel good always. So in a way, that's like impossible. And I think knowing that in the back of my heart, it's like, okay, those are a lot of anxiety living in all this. So this certainly kind of gets right into it. It's just really a tear-inducing film. It's one of the most depressing films ever made. Maybe the most depressing film that came out of 2000, right with Requiem for a Dream. There were depressing films coming out of the year 2000. I mean, the album Kid A by Radiohead also came out that year. A lot of depression was really coming out and moving in very original ways. This is one of the best films of doing that. It turns out, much like how the film Rosemary's Baby is. It's like this is just one of the best explorations of evil I've ever seen. It turns out. And then you just have Bjork just really kind of going on with pure naivete and pure bubbly just joy the entire way through, and then it's explosive whenever it gets depressing, and it's all like the ultimate expression of just like delusion versus reality being expressed in a very grounded sense. And I mean, it's just really, golly, it makes you just prefer to be blind in a lot of ways, because whenever you express your joy to too many people, abundances of evil forces can lay upon you, and then literally you get like the worst thing can happen. It is a little over the top, it's exaggerated, but that's where all the headspace is. No one's in a down to earth mood whatsoever. This is very intense and very minimalist, in fact, as far as expressing maximalist moods, you could say. because it just kind of washes over you. Like you're questioning a lot of ways, like why am I watching this? But that's why you're watching it, because you're questioning it. It's the way it's very mystic. It's ultimately an evil thing that feels very innocent, like the first hour and a half. This one was very organic. It just feels like organic, but then it just becomes kind of just what it is to just have like like just mistreatment everywhere. It's like only bond decency she has is with Kathleen New's character. Like everyone else is just mean and torturous to her. And this certainly feels like, I think, the most beautiful film along with Breaking the Waves. I think that Lars von Trier. It's like he's an ugly man who's just like, holding on to a glimpse of beauty while he can. It's tear-inducing. The final 30 minutes of this film are literally so tear-inducing that it's hard to talk about. Like, this film is a film that quite literally leaves you of silence. That's the best films of the 2010s to communicate it. It's like it's a place of silence that's ultimately best. It's very shaking. And it does make you kind of despise, because I think there's an inner sense in people that, despising people. I don't want to be around this much energy of hope and love, because deep down tragedy lives out there too, but you still kind of want to preserve your hope. And this is like an exaggerated tale of someone who simply cannot, no matter how much its desire is there. And this literally is crazy. This is perhaps just one of the darkest love film ever made, perhaps you could say, by way of just literally a director who becomes despicable in his perspectives, as a hatred being expressed, and New York is just meanwhile the most powerful force of woman I've ever seen, perhaps, because she's released these masterpiece albums. And, I mean, she literally the following year she made Vespertine, which is just an intense exploration of her sexual growth in a lot of ways, which is just it's just perfect. It's a perfect album. It's one of the best albums ever made, I think. And expressing this in a way I can just kind of understand it, and getting into the demons of it, so in a lot of ways, that's the adventurism of it all. But this film also most certainly gets into demons, and it real certainly is a perfect exploration of all the modern fears of like sexual assault allegations. I mean, those are like I think that's the modern tale of horror right there. That's why, I want to live the rest of my life never ever being closely associated with that. Thank God I have never been, and never will be. That's the way I always will be. That's why I got my way of walking at distance. Because it's like it'll always be nice and good. It's the way it always will be. That's what feels right in the spirit and soul. So strip back. This is just really doing so much that feels very cinematic, and it just draws you right in. The way it punches you in the gut so hard that I only watch this film once every few years because it hurts so much. But the way this hurts lives in my soul timelessly, and it really is a perfect exploration of just delusion as it hits a character in a very gut-wrenching kind of way. I mean, this is perfect. This really is just kind of the intense boundaries of the dark side of all the hippiedom. It's just like full power control to the extent of insanity. And it's just a way that the strictness is living inside of all of this. Like, it feels strict, you could say, because there's a man's personalized rules and restrictions, and that's perhaps what's evil about the general side, the evil side of a god complex, you could say, which directors most certainly, I'm realizing, yes, that there does consist of this god complex. So to look at that is to confess the coldness, I believe, officially. So, but to see that is just to kind of get into the essentials of just what's going on in a person's imagination. I mean, I think the essence of a lot of it is there is kind of like a certain innocence of perspective that you want to maintain. But then there's like a force of evil that can come from just desiring that over the greater good of humanity and for others, giving power away rather than consuming it for yourself. It's like once you have the platform, it's like, how do you? And instantly, that's what all the art of 2000s I think have been saying. It's just like, rid of your ego, like balance your ego to healthy places, rather not get rid of it. But ego exists to everybody. But it's like, be healthy. And this is a cautionary tale of just something that became extremely unhealthy. It's extremely emotional the entire way through. I mean, this is some storytelling that's just unrivaled because it's not overproduced whatsoever, and it just gets straight to the point of simplicity. But something very compelling. That's the year 2000. That was interesting. Yale said the year almost famous. Bootleg cut. That was a complete contrast of what's going on and stuff like here. But this is equally perfect. Again, I watch this less frequently because this is harsh. And it is really personal in the way that it's expressed here by Bjork, way of Bjork, the ultimate expression of a delusional, place, a way of trouble that comes upon her. And it's just really powerful the entire way through. Like, I really love the way it's just consistently expressed in its own form. And that's Dancer in the Dark. It's one terrifying expression of hell on earth, you could say. And it doesn't hold back, but I think it's quite perfect in expressing this in a very emotional, raw kind of way. The complete contrast of a lot of the, Catherine Deneuve, like the Young Girls of Rochefort, you could say. Like, but here, she was doing all this stuff here. So is Bjork. Like, they do remind me of each other in a lot of ways. It's like the nicest expression of womanhood. It feels like, of course, Bjork is rebellious here in this because she's under something intense, but she barks back much more geniusly because I don't think anything Lars von Trier made after this honestly hits quite the same. Although I do understand there's power to the man, but the evil. That's the dark side right there. That's why it's hard to when I'm making those director lists, it's like I really want to talk about Roman Polanski, but then I hate him so much for being the devil inside. But then I hate that I relate so much to a lot of what he's expressing in his films even more. So it's like, yeah, there's a line right there. Wow. And a lot of these directors are very dark-minded because with power becomes great responsibility. And most certainly, the most important thing is to treat everyone well whenever you have a position of power. Like, don't let anything get out of control or crazy, like whatsoever. When temptation like that arises to do so, it's just like, because consequences are really out there. I just, feels like Bjork is heaven. I mean, Moist moved on with Vespertine, expresses perfectly. I'll have to talk about that one. So sometime Bjork, I mean, she's a special one of a kind. But Lars von Trier captures the evil, ugly side of a man's perspective on womanhood that lies in a man. Perhaps loneliness could be a spot of it. So that's why the coldness cannot get too far. There always has to be a grasp of humanity. Like, I just did personally, women are better. Well, I'll just watch who you give your power to, watch who you hang out with for a long period of time to guide your depths of power. Make sure they're being guided to the right places. So this kind of evil because a lot of this evil, of course, just comes from, rejection in a lot of ways, like feeling rejected. So it's like, you feel like, okay, now that I can do whatever I want, I'm not feeling so nice kind of feeling. But it can go the wrong ways if you don't have that cautionary tale for yourself as a man. Know your limits and know your lines instantly. So that's Dancer in the Dark. It's perfect. Perfect film of expressing something that's unholy evil on Earth. And perhaps never has a lot of tones from the 2010s really been this harsh. I think the year 2000 just laid out some like post 90s, hippiedom being dead at a full extreme. That's perhaps what a lot of the 2000s were growing up on, just like intensity. But there has to be like a mystic optimism in the air. So certainly Bjork has that mystic optimism. So I mean, she expresses this light side, in innocence being corrupted in the most pure, organic kind of way. So, yeah, Dancer in the Dark.